When billionaires start buying dirt, paper money is about to become worthless. On October 12, 2021, Bill Gates completed the purchase of 242,000 acres of farmland across 18 states, making him the largest private farmland owner in America. Not urban real estate or technology companies or financial instruments, but rural agricultural land that most investors considered outdated, low return, and economically irrelevant. Gates paid premium prices for properties that local farmers couldn't afford and institutional investors had ignored for decades. Within 18 months, Jeff Bezos acquired 420,000 acres of ranch and farmland across Texas and Washington. Mark Zuckerberg purchased 1,500 acres of agricultural property in Hawaii at prices that exceeded $100,000 per acre. Warren Buffett, through Berkshire Hathaway, accumulated massive positions in agricultural land and water rights across the Midwest. The world's wealthiest individuals were systematically acquiring the asset class that sophisticated finance had abandoned. This wasn't diversification strategy or environmental philanthropy. This was mathematical recognition that productive land represents the ultimate store of value during periods when financial systems face breakdown pressures that make paper assets unreliable wealth preservation vehicles. When the world's most sophisticated investors simultaneously abandon financial complexity for agricultural simplicity, they're revealing institutional knowledge about economic conditions that conventional analysis cannot detect. Understanding elite farmland acquisition requires recognizing historical patterns where wealthy individuals systematically reallocate assets before major economic disruptions become obvious to public analysis. Elite behavior operates according to information advantages and analytical capabilities that enable wealth preservation decisions years before crisis events make such decisions obviously necessary. The mathematical foundation of farmland investment during unstable periods reflects agricultural land's unique economic characteristics as productive asset that generates essential goods regardless of monetary system functionality. Unlike financial assets that depend on institutional stability and currency reliability, agricultural land produces food that maintains value through any economic system because human survival requires caloric intake that only productive land can provide sustainably. Historical analysis reveals that elite farmland acquisition patterns provide reliable early warning indicators for major economic disruptions because wealthy individuals possess information networks and analytical capabilities that enable recognition of systemic breakdown before conventional indicators reveal developing problems. Elite behavior patterns typically precede public crisis awareness by 18 to 36 months. Pre-World War I, European aristocracy demonstrated this pattern through systematic asset reallocation from European holdings to American investments between 1912 and 1914. Wealthy European families moved substantial portions of their wealth across the Atlantic, while conventional analysis suggested European economic conditions remained stable and war probabilities remained low. The Rothschild banking family reduced their European government bond holdings by 40% between 1912 and 1913, while increasing American railroad and agricultural investments. The Krupp industrial dynasty transferred substantial assets to neutral countries, despite Germany's apparent economic strength and political stability. European aristocratic families systematically acquired American farmland and natural resource properties. These allocation decisions preceded public awareness of war probabilities by 18 months and preceded actual conflict initiation by 24 months. Elite information networks and analytical capabilities enabled recognition of systemic breakdown risks that conventional analysis missed until those risks became unavoidable realities. The 1970s provided another example of elite asset reallocation preceding obvious economic breakdown. Wealthy American families began systematic gold accumulation and international diversification between 1971 and 1973, while conventional economic analysis suggested inflation risks remained manageable and monetary system stability seemed assured. David Rockefeller increased precious metals holdings and foreign real estate investments between 1971 and 1972, despite public statements supporting dollar stability and Federal Reserve monetary policies. The Hunt family began massive silver accumulation campaigns that eventually attempted to corner the global silver market. Wealthy Texas oil families systematically acquired international properties and hard assets. These elite allocation decisions preceded obvious inflation problems by 30 months and preceded general public recognition of monetary system breakdown by 48 months. Elite analytical capabilities enabled recognition that Nixon's monetary policy changes would create systematic inflation pressures long before such consequences became mathematically obvious through conventional economic indicators. Pre-2008 financial crisis elite behavior demonstrated identical patterns through wealthy individuals who reduced financial system exposure while increasing hard asset allocation between 2005 and 2007. Elite investors began systematic reduction of complex financial instruments while increasing agricultural land, precious metals, and international real estate positions. John Paulson, George Soros, and other elite investors began systematic farmland acquisition programs between 2005 and 2006, while publicly available analysis suggested real estate markets remained strong and financial system stability appeared assured. Wealthy families reduced exposure to mortgage-backed securities and complex derivatives while increasing allocation to productive agricultural properties. Elite farmland purchases during this period paid premium prices for properties that conventional investors considered overvalued relative to agricultural income potential. But elite analysis focused on farmland's value as productive asset during financial system stress rather than optimization of agricultural returns during stable conditions. Current elite farmland acquisition patterns exceed any historical precedent in scale, speed, and coordination across multiple wealthy individuals simultaneously. The mathematical magnitude suggests institutional recognition of systemic breakdown risks that exceed previous crisis episodes in scope and timeline. Bill Gates's agricultural land accumulation spans multiple regions and climate zones, indicating preparation for agricultural production disruptions that could affect specific geographic areas. The diversification pattern suggests concern about supply chain breakdown and regional production failures that would require geographically distributed agricultural assets for food security assurance. Gates's farmland portfolio includes properties with water rights, irrigation infrastructure, and established production capabilities rather than raw land requiring development. This acquisition pattern suggests timeline urgency that prioritizes immediate productive capacity over long-term agricultural development projects. Jeff Bezos's ranch and farmland acquisitions focus on properties with water access and mineral rights, in addition to agricultural productivity. The multi-use properties suggest preparation for scenarios where land value depends on multiple resource types rather than agricultural production alone. Mark Zuckerberg's Hawaii agricultural property purchases include comprehensive infrastructure development with self-sufficiency capabilities that exceed normal agricultural operations. The properties feature independent power generation, water systems, and food processing facilities that suggest preparation for extended periods of system independence. Warren Buffett's agricultural investments through Berkshire Hathaway include farmland ownership combined with agricultural equipment manufacturing and food processing companies. This vertical integration suggests preparation for scenarios where controlling entire agricultural production chains becomes necessary for food security assurance. The coordination timing of elite farmland acquisition suggests shared information sources and analytical frameworks that lead to identical conclusions about agricultural land investment necessity. When multiple billionaires simultaneously reach identical investment decisions about previously ignored asset classes, their behavior indicates institutional knowledge about developing conditions. Elite information networks include institutional relationships with central banks, government agencies, and international organizations that provide access to economic data and analysis unavailable through public channels. Elite advisory firms possess analytical capabilities and historical databases that enable pattern recognition exceeding conventional financial analysis. These information advantages enable elite recognition of systemic breakdown patterns before such patterns become obvious through conventional indicators. Elite behavior operates according to institutional knowledge that identifies crisis development during early stages when prevention remains possible but becomes increasingly unlikely. Current elite farmland acquisition occurs during a period when conventional analysis suggests economic conditions remain manageable despite various stress indicators. Elite behavior suggests institutional recognition that current conditions indicate systematic breakdown probability exceeding what conventional analysis acknowledges. The mathematical pattern of elite behavior preceding crisis events reflects information processing capabilities and analytical timeframes that exceed conventional institutional capacity. Elite wealth preservation operates according to longer time horizons and more comprehensive risk analysis than normal investment decision-making processes. Elite farmland acquisition represents preparation for scenarios where paper assets lose value while productive land maintains worth through its capacity to generate essential goods. This allocation strategy suggests elite analysis concludes that monetary system breakdown probability exceeds sustainable thresholds within predictable timeframes. Agricultural land ownership provides multiple forms of value preservation during economic breakdown periods. Food production capabilities ensure survival necessities regardless of monetary system functionality. Land ownership provides inflation protection through asset appreciation that typically exceeds currency debasement rates. Water rights and mineral access provide additional resource control that becomes valuable during scarcity periods. The mathematical advantage of agricultural land during crisis periods reflects its position as productive asset rather than financial claim. Unlike stocks, bonds, or currency instruments that represent claims on future economic performance, agricultural land produces tangible goods that maintain value independent of institutional system functionality. International examples demonstrate agricultural land value preservation during major economic breakdowns. Soviet Union collapse saw agricultural property maintain worth while financial assets became worthless. Argentine economic crisis preserved farmland values while peso-denominated assets lost substantial purchasing power. Venezuelan hyperinflation maintained agricultural land worth while Bolivar currency became functionally worthless. These historical examples demonstrate agricultural land's mathematical superiority as wealth preservation vehicle during monetary system breakdown, because productive land generates essential goods that retain value regardless of currency or institutional stability. Elite water rights acquisition represents additional preparation dimension beyond agricultural production capabilities. Water scarcity concerns motivate elite accumulation of water access rights that become increasingly valuable as population growth and climate change reduce per capita water availability. T. Boone Pickens accumulated substantial water rights across Texas oil properties, not for petroleum production, but for long-term water asset control. Stuart and Linda Resnick built agricultural empire focused on water-intensive crops combined with comprehensive water rights ownership. Elite investors increasingly view water access as strategic resource requiring systematic accumulation. Current drought conditions across multiple agricultural regions demonstrate water rights value during scarcity periods. Elite water rights ownership provides resource control that becomes strategically important during periods of reduced agricultural productivity or increased competition for water resources. Elite mineral rights acquisition combined with farmland ownership suggests preparation for scenarios where land value depends on multiple resource extraction capabilities rather than agricultural production alone. Properties with oil, gas, rare earth elements, or other mineral deposits provide additional value sources during economic transition periods. The technological capabilities that billionaires bring to agricultural operations represent modernization investments that improve productive efficiency while providing operational independence from conventional agricultural supply chains. Elite farmland operations include advanced irrigation, processing facilities, and distribution networks that enable self-sufficiency exceeding traditional farming operations. These technological enhancements suggest elite preparation for scenarios where conventional agricultural supply chains face disruption while independently operated properties maintain production capabilities. The investment scale exceeds what agricultural returns alone would justify, indicating value calculations based on crisis scenarios rather than normal agricultural economics. Elite agricultural investment timing suggests institutional recognition that current global conditions approach sustainability limits that could trigger systematic breakdown within predictable time frames. Elite allocation patterns typically precede crisis events by sufficient time margins to enable wealth preservation through asset reallocation before breakdown conditions make such reallocation impossible. The mathematical consistency of elite behavior across multiple wealthy individuals indicates shared analytical conclusions about economic trajectory and systematic risk probabilities. When numerous billionaires simultaneously abandon financial complexity for agricultural simplicity, their collective behavior suggests institutional knowledge about developing conditions. Elite farmland acquisition represents mathematical recognition that productive assets provide superior wealth preservation during institutional breakdown compared to financial assets that depend on system stability for value maintenance. Agricultural land produces essential goods that maintain worth regardless of monetary policy or institutional functionality. Understanding elite behavior as institutional early warning system provides insight into economic conditions that conventional analysis fails to detect. Elite information advantages and analytical capabilities enable crisis recognition before public indicators reveal developing problems. Current elite farmland acquisition patterns suggest systematic economic breakdown preparation that exceeds previous historical precedents in scope and coordination. When the world's wealthiest individuals simultaneously reallocate wealth from financial complexity to agricultural productive capacity, their behavior indicates institutional recognition of developing crisis conditions. The mathematical inevitability of their conclusions suggests current economic conditions approach breakdown thresholds that make protective asset allocation necessary for wealth preservation. Elite behavior operates according to information and analysis that identifies crisis probability before conventional indicators make such probability obvious. When billionaires start buying dirt, they're not investing in agriculture. They're preparing for the mathematical certainty that paper money becomes worthless, while productive land maintains value through its capacity to generate essential goods that sustain human survival regardless of monetary system functionality. Elite farmland acquisition represents institutional recognition that current economic conditions approach mathematical limits that require productive asset ownership for wealth preservation through systematic breakdown periods that conventional analysis cannot predict, but elite analytical capabilities identify through historical pattern recognition and comprehensive risk assessment. The dirt they're buying represents the ultimate store of value during periods when paper assets become mathematical impossibilities and productive land becomes the foundation for wealth preservation and human survival during economic transitions that reset monetary systems while leaving agricultural productivity unchanged